CitizenCon this year is weirdly poised to be a very big info drop or a quiet sputter. With such a quiet 2025 info-wise around Star Citizen, there are two key possibilities. They've either banked up on the feature work they've been doing, or they haven't. That split possibility is the difference between a pretty exciting and feature-heavy event or a quiet one. With so much focus on Squadron 42, it's easy to assume the latter, but there are a few good reasons to suspect the former. There's actually a lot of nuance to this year's event, and understanding it will help you understand the state of the game a lot clearer. Today, I want to talk about how this could be either a very exciting moment or a surprisingly quiet one. Then we'll talk about what kind of gameplay showcases and features we might actually see on October 11th. Thank you for coming to my Tomato Talk. Every year for Star Citizen is a pretty bumpy journey for players, but 2025 has been a little bit different, and it's really setting up the CitizenCon Direct to be an interesting show. There have been no feature development updates on Inside Star Citizen, fewer Inside Star Citizens overall, less Star Citizen Live episodes, and an entirely different branch of development in the game meant to keep the more advanced feature development from affecting the live game that we've been playing, according to the company's CTO. Outside of text-based monthly reports, players have been pretty insulated from the more experimental and forward-facing, but less reliable side of the game's development this year, not really seeing much to do with features and more advanced mechanics, unlike any other year really. But that's not what ultimately built the tension this year. No, what has really put pressure on this CitizenCon has been the insistence of an EPTU or tech preview version of Star Citizen that would still allow players a small peek into whatever feature-focused side of development was going on. Explained as a bit of a feature incubator at the beginning of the year, this set expectations for players that the content and playability focus of 2025 in the live servers would still allow players to follow along with what many felt actually mattered, the developing gameplay systems and the mechanics surrounding them. That did not happen, and the EPTU is only just being put into some use to integrate the last 9 months of graphics updates just now. With the current understanding that getting the more anticipated engineering feature into this early testing phase is still not even guaranteed for this year. No FPS scanning and radar, no quantum travel, no control surfaces, no engineering, no base building. None of the caliber of things players would normally have gotten some form of updates on in past years. So it's safe to say the EPTU was not utilized as we'd hoped this year. Without that visibility on features, systems, and more crucial mechanics, the expectations for CitizenCon are simultaneously higher and lower for many players. Many think it'll be a continuation of this year. At a lower runtime than normal of 2 hours long, it could be light on big ticket items and just play out like 4 or 5 uninspired extra long Inside Star Citizen episodes. To others though, the quiet year has been a clear sign of just how much information they have actually been holding back in anticipation of this event. Something they usually do throughout every year, but only for a couple of months. Now, I've covered this in recent videos, but I want to be clear again. CIG has begun shifting its means of keeping players enticed, away from promising features and advancements and towards offering a dynamic game experience that delivers regular new things to do. If you understand that, you understand where Star Citizen is going overall. With this thinking, it's easy to see how CitizenCon can be a more effective delivery, especially considering the potentially wider audience that they want to advertise to now. They don't need to compete with dozens of Inside Star Citizen episodes to wow players that have been paying attention all year long with upcoming developments that maybe they haven't seen, a whole bunch of fluff, and then a whole bunch of unnecessary chatter as well, bloating the runtime. They can pick and choose from any number of developments that have been hidden over the last 9 months, choosing features that are closer to delivery, more stable, and more realistic for the near future game. They can package these advancements in a more timely, well-prepared, and pre-recorded set of demos or showcases that give an idea of the path ahead. I'm not saying they'll be spot on with the timelines, they never are, but I do think this year will continue the trend of their presentation style getting more professional and to the point than it was, and it'll be done at least partially by showing an easily shareable chunk of gameplay that people from outside the community can sink their teeth into. And I'm not saying CIG won't do what they always do and hype something up before it's ready to be in the spotlight. There has to be some kind of bluster for it to be a CitizenCon. But I do think they've positioned themselves for an opportunity to deliver something more realistic while still being the most interesting info drop we've seen all year. With this silent lead up to the biggest moment of the year, a confirmation that Squadron 42 won't be at the event, and an open admission that this year will not be focused on the distant 1.0 set of promises, but rather the next year of development, this, again, could be a very quiet year, or a look at a lot of good game systems. And I think within 20 minutes of the whole thing starting, we'll already know. So let me tell you about some of the big things that we might see. With such a quiet year behind us, there is so much we could see at CitizenCon this year. Yes, 2 hours is shorter than normal, but if you consider a normal game showcase at something like E3, there's a gigantic amount of space for a number of features and developments to be shown. Even in previous years like 2023, they were showcasing a dozen different features in just a half hour live. So let's consider what they could show us given an hour to an hour and a half of possible gameplay and the features that we've seen talked about in monthly reports throughout the year. First, the more likely safe bets I think that are pretty certain and arguably the main culprits for a potentially information-heavy event. Engineering is basically a guarantee. Being one of the core game systems in development for 5 years and close to players' hands, this simply makes sense as something that shows up in whatever gameplay we see. And I do think we'll see gameplay this year, mostly in-engine gameplay that gives us a better look at a lot of what has been in concept art and white box, or just words on the monthly report. Speaking of monthly reports, a common mention has been radar scanning and ship signatures, something we haven't seen much of from even Squadron 42, but I think this crucial feature set will finally make an appearance in some way given the necessity of it in both games. Of course, the flight model will also be on show. Control surfaces do make a lot of sense here considering they are being focus tested already, but I'm curious if we'll see thruster damage or possibly the new version of quantum travel this year. And it's not a CitizenCon if we don't see planet tech improvements. Whether we'll see full dynamic weather and new biomes, or just possibly an existing planet, like Microtech, with updated tech is not clear. But we've seen plenty of signs that Planet Tech V5 is close at hand and possibly ready for a showcase. It's an easy, impressive addition, let's be honest. And for the big wow factor, of course, I don't think it's a hot take to guess at Nyx showing up. I do think we could see a CitizenCon 2022 style demo in a new point of interest in the new star system, but expect it to be much better paced and more professional than it was back then. This showcase could possibly include a new straight-to-flyable ship, and possibly another expected addition like the Anvil Paladin, though I do think there will still be the inevitable talking ship segment sometime in this 2 hours. The whole event would probably be a good opportunity to also update players on Starware, as many of the armor sets introduced with it have been implemented since last year, and they've covered some version of Starware or cloth tech or armor in the last 5 years of CitizenCons. It kind of makes sense, but I haven't seen much acknowledgement of the overall system this year, so it is still a little less likely in my opinion. Base building is something I do expect to see in some way though. Ideally, we would get to see a relatively complete in-engine demo of the mechanic, complete with some kind of a UI. While crafting is still being re-evaluated for a public release, base building did seem further along last year, as it was working on the client side for the team, and they began working on it overall back in 2024 first half. Now would be a fantastic time to show a likely big part of what the end game is going to be for a lot of players. On the UI side of things, I think we'll see some polished interfaces that we already have, but particularly I expect to see something about the new contract manager, which is in dire need of a full overhaul given their higher rate of pushing out new contracts and the fact that it is so crucial to a good player experience. And it wouldn't be in October at Star Citizen without some back-end updates. Looking at global illumination, AI development, the Vulkan API, and whatever's going on with server meshing. After that, let's move on to things maybe that are a little less likely but still possible, the wildcards. A look at player interaction, the social tools that were just concepts last year, any form of player trading or improvements in storefronts and shopping throughout the game. It's looking more and more likely we may see the Vanduul ship updates as well, reintroduced alongside a new Vanduul ship, as we do have something significant on the referrals ladder expected at the event. Could this be an opportunity for Star Citizen to introduce a new in-game store as well? Selling aftermarket ships you could earn in-game somewhere in Nyx? This is a rumor that's possibly going around, but we'll have to see. And while I don't expect to see much, if anything, about crafting, other than maybe the blueprint system and some design work, it would be a great opportunity now for CIG to talk about next steps in item recovery, which include the ability to brick items, disassemble them for materials, and fully loot other people again. And maybe they'll give us a look at this updated inventory system they've been working so much on. It's gotten more work in the last couple of months than I expected. And more a hope than anything, I'm thinking maybe they'll dedicate some of their time to airing a segment of this that is geared towards new players. How is the game being made easier for players to actually start playing on their own? Over the next year, CIG is going to really want to start focusing on that, and I think this would be a great time for them to start. But we'll see. Oh, and maybe we'll get lucky and they'll show us some hacking gameplay as well. Now, those were just the wild cards, some things I think could show up due to talk throughout the year, but aren't as guaranteed as that first segment of features. These next ones are just my copium. These aren't going to happen, but I like to talk about them anyways. This, of course, would be data running, my most anticipated profession in the game, one of the most novel aspects of Star Citizen as it has been pitched, and honestly, something that I am a little worried might not show up in the game how they've talked about. But actually, a Squadron 42 update would also go on this part of the list, since they said there wouldn't actually be one. You never know. A look into what StarSim is going to offer the game in terms of economic simulation, and the previously advertised virtual AI would also be huge on my wish list here, and a look at resource nodes, points of interest on a larger scale, and the overall makeup of what a Star Citizen star system looks like at 1.0. Finally, to top this off, in-person mission giver interactions in a much more involved mission setting would be great, and maybe if we're extremely lucky, an advancement in one of the professions planned for the game. I don't want to ramble on about all the possibilities any more than this. The point is clear. There are some very key reasons this could go either way. But above all else, I expect to see a substantial showing of those things that I've mentioned in a working environment. I expect to be brought up to date on everything that we missed over the last 9 months of limited inside Star Citizens and Star Citizen lives. I expect to be disappointed, but also just better informed about what's clearly the second priority for CIG right now, the persistent universe. And I expect to hear some unbridled optimism about the future of this project. It'll be a condensed version of CitizenCon, an expanded version of Inside Star Citizen, whatever you want to call it. What we know for sure is that whatever comes of this event is just another blip in the path. Nothing is final, nothing is decisive, and nothing is guaranteed. Take in the information we get, but don't be like me, don't obsess over it. Enjoy the game we have, and eventually some of these things should start trickling in. If you'd like to get a summary of what we do end up seeing afterward, I'll be releasing one here along with a little scorecard of how many of these features actually showed up. And I'll have multiple more detailed looks over on Space Tomato 2 for you, along with my podcast episode reviewing the event a couple days afterward with Luke Stevens, which you can find last year's linked down below if you're interested in getting ahead. Thank you for watching this video until the end. I hope you learned something new in it, and I'll catch you in the next.